So, what are we gonna do now? Well, we have a lot of steak, but we might be expecting guests. And they definitely eat eggs for breakfast.
You'll still have 4 left. It's a box to the dozen, isn't it? Or am I mistaken?
No, you're not mistaken.
In 2007, a psychological horror film in the name of Funny Games was released. The movie starred Naomi Watts, Tim Roth, and Michael Pitt amongst others, and while the movie did not do great at the box office, it developed a cult following over the years, with some affirming it was better than critics gave it credit for. The problem with Funny Games is not that it is the worst movie ever made. The issue is that there is a much better version of the same story that came out 10 years prior, directed by the same person, director Michael Haneke. During an interview with the Sydney Morning Herald, the director revealed why he decided to remake Funny Games. He said, "The first film didn't reach the public I think really ought to see this film, so I decided to make it again. The original was in German. When I first envisioned Funny Games in the mid-90s, it was my intention to have an American audience watch the movie. It is a reaction to a certain American cinema, its violence, its naivety, the way American cinema toys with human beings." In case you didn't know, the original Funny Games is an Austrian psychological horror that came out in 1997 and was a huge critical and moderate commercial success. However, according to the director, American audiences seem to struggle to read subtitles when they go to the movies. And since Funny Games was in German, his intended audience never got the chance to see his vision. However, given the mixed reaction the remake received anyways, one has to ask what we think is a very important question. Are foreign language films, remakes, really necessary? There are multiple ways of looking at it. The answer is not simply a yes or a no. You can point fingers at The Wicker Man, Taxi, or Old Boy and claim that original foreign language films should never be remade. My eyes! But then again, someone could point out that Martin Scorsese's The Departed, which is a remake of the Hong Kong movie Internal Affairs, won Best Picture in 2006. Or that Sergio Leone plagiarizing Akira Kurosawa gave birth to one of the coolest characters Clint Eastwood has ever played. It is not a simple question to answer, but to be able to at least give some kind of an answer to this question, we first need to understand why remakes exist. Some believe it has everything to do with capitalizing on the success of an original story, which is not completely false. A Parasite TV series was announced just days after the original won Best Picture. A Train to Busan remake was announced soon after the release of the original, and that is because Hollywood tries to capitalize as quickly as possible on the success of a foreign language film. However, that is not the only reason. Remakes have existed for a long time. As soon as foreign language films started to gain momentum, remakes emerged in Hollywood as an opportunity to keep growing the American movie industry while fishing for stories in other countries. Is this really such a bad thing? Well, on one hand, the subtitle issue is real, and so many people simply miss out on great stories just because they are not interested in watching anything that has subtitles. Remaking those films allow for a wider reach, and especially when it is the same filmmaker doing it. It could be beneficial for the story as it could get to more people, which could ultimately make those who enjoy the remake want to go back and watch the original to compare. In some cases, it could be a win-win situation, and that is what can be seen as the biggest motive for remakes: mainstream exposure. But then again, is it not better to solve the issue of exposure with dubs like Netflix is doing now with its foreign language films like All Quiet on the Western Front than make a completely different film? It's like they say, Movies are not just for the audience to escape the real world, they are also made for the audience to discover it. By remaking a movie that has influence of different environments, that celebrates different cultures, you are depriving the English-speaking audience from discovering a different experience. You are depriving people from expanding their view of the world as we know it. A movie like Parasite could have been just another Eat the Rich American film that we have seen a dozen times. What made it so unique outside of its amazing script and the amazing direction from Bong Joon-ho was the fact that we had not experienced such themes from another country's point of view, a country we were not familiar with. That is why Americans can't make anime, at least not the way it's done in Japan, because it is not about drawing characters and animating them. It is about a different culture and their own way of creating characters and animating them. Their use of songs, expressions, dialogue, it is unique to them. It is their voice, from their country to the world. Remaking that is just a way of making the world smaller than it actually is. However, can they still work regardless? Just as I mentioned earlier, there are movies that have done a great job remaking an already great foreign film, but it is clear why some remakes work better than others. Of course, having the right people in front and behind the camera is crucial, but it is important to know how to transform an idea to suit a different demographic. Like how it would be easier to remake a detective story that uses the investigation to move the narrative, rather than one that uses a murder mystery to comment on a political system. The transformation of a story for a more mainstream audience could also backfire if the filmmakers do not understand the type of message they are trying to convey with the remake, or if they remake the story without exploring how transforming the story could ruin the narrative and the story's themes. More often than not, filmmakers tend to remake foreign films nearly shot for shot while only changing locations and the dialogue. And when the narrative doesn't make sense in the particular setting, they make changes that either contradict the rest of the film or compromise the message of the entire story. Although not technically a remake, the American version of Godzilla is a great example of that. The movie not only had to change the name from Godzilla to Godzilla for a more mainstream audience, the mainstream version added a white character in the middle of the chaos, and it just doesn't work, and on so many levels compromises the initial message of the movie. A movie that is originally a criticism on nuclear weapons is turned into a mindless monster movie in the editing room with an English-speaking character who seems to just be there to be the familiar face. And in the middle of that, the message of cruelty caused by nuclear bombing that gives birth to a monster gets lost. One of the best remakes are usually samurai films that were turned into westerns, mainly because the two genres inspired each other, so it is easier to transform one narrative into the other. If it is a story about a ronin, make it about a loner cowboy. If it's about 7 honorable samurai protecting a village, you make it about 7 likable cowboys protecting a small town. The stories follow the same beats but can still stand apart. Too often, remakes are treated less like art being converted for a different audience and more like an opportunity to cash in. Filmmakers need to have something to say. The Coen brothers made True Grit as a passion project, not a cash grab. Scorsese made The Departed because the story spoke to him, and he felt like remaking it would allow him to express himself in a similar way, but in a way that's also totally unique to him. He didn't even make the movie for awards, as he admitted he didn't think it would get any because it was too violent for that. His passion for the story is the reason he made that film. With that being said, the question remains, are foreign films remakes necessary? The truth is, that question really doesn't matter. The question should be, should people watch more foreign language films? Absolutely. Remakes are going to exist. They are part of the filmmaking industry. There are even remakes of American films and remakes of remakes. Some remake old TV shows and make them into a franchise that will last for 2 decades, and others will remake anime, video games, and animated classics. Remakes are just part of the movie industry for different reasons, depending on the type of adaptation, and for foreign films, for reasons we have already mentioned in this video. The most important thing is to push for regular folks to get out of their comfort zone and watch movies in a language they don't understand, shot in places they have never been to, played by actors that don't look like them. There are countries out there where people don't speak English, where people don't live in the same reality as you. Movies help you travel in different corners of the globe and show you places you never knew existed. So, why limit yourself? As Bong Joon-ho once said, if you overcome the 1-inch tall barrier of subtitles, you will be introduced to so many great films. So, jump that barrier, go out there and explore.